all about educating kids during a pandemic. So of course, we're going through our preparation to get NEASC accreditation, and along with that, all the curriculum work that we've done to date. I think we have 187 curriculum units that have been adopted by the board, and that are very thorough and populated according to the Madison criteria. So along with that, as this committee knows, we have one or two what we call capacities that are part of every single unit we adopt. And kids experience and grow in those capacities, but they also are receiving feedback against rubrics in those capacities. Unfortunately, when we adopted the profile of the graduate, pandemic hits, we never had a chance to develop the rubrics to go with the new capacities. And as it turns out, time is a wonderful thing, because teacher leaders come to the rescue and chair the committee, Jenna Guzzi, saying, hey, I would love to chair this committee. We can get the rubrics up and going. And she chaired a K-12 committee, interdisciplinary, in this room over several days. And in that charge was not only looking at what we call the capacities in the profile of a graduate from an academic perspective, but also the charge was to look at them from a social emotional capacity perspective. So this iteration of capacities actually includes both aspects for student growth and feedback, which we're really excited about. So it gives us a nice foundation for our wellness curriculum to go forth and be developed, as well as our academics curriculums to look at some of the areas that we really need to grow and foster over time. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So I wanted to introduce Jen to you as our courageous leader. And this is not the first project that Jen has led in district. There have been many others, but I knew I had a key leader when she jumped over and said, I'll do it. So thank you, Jen.
Thank you. And I could not have done it without the team, some of whom are here. Michelle and Stephanie have helped, along with lots of other people who are way smarter than I am. So yeah, I think this really started back even in 2012, 2013, when we made the 21st century capacities and the breakout rubrics to go along with them. We were so well poised when we went through curriculum to really embed those skills in all of our different curricular areas, K through 12, and have that language. So it's something I know in my department, we really felt not having the updated capacities. That was completely understandable with everything going through with the pandemic. But when we were asked to kind of look at the updated capacities, like compared to the first ones, and make those swaps to say, hey, this used to say global thinking, now it's really citizenship, and just line up where things had been consolidated. And we looked at our PBAs and said, well, we also need to make rubrics for the PBAs. And I heard anecdotally that people were just starting to write their own rubrics. And we thought that's, not the direction that we had really committed to as a district. So between that and NEASC, for which I am the co-accreditation chair, I came to Gail and asked for some support in revising these rubrics, and she, as always, was very supportive. So we put together this team, 2 days that were, they were good days. I don't know. Very productive days. Yes, we did a lot of drafting and then round robin, looking at iterations and wordsmithing. We really made an effort to get a team that would be K-12 as well as interdisciplinary, so we could have lots of different lenses and do our best to capture them. I think that a couple of things you might notice if you compare the older versions of the rubrics to these is that these are in I statements. And that was something, I also do a lot of work with the Curriculum Review Council. And I've seen, even though I teach high school, I've seen a lot of the elementary curriculums. And I could see that it's really student friendly. I also have a Jeffrey student, so I can understand why so many teachers here would really prefer that I statement. And it's really just a high school where it might start to tend to be written as like the student does this, but that's an easy swap. There are a few different places in the rubrics where there are brackets. I know citizenship, which is up on the wall over there, is one of them. And those bracket places are meant to say, hey, here's a very long list that's not all appropriate to this project, please choose. Right, so that teachers can really customize these rubrics, keeping the heart of the matter, but make it into language that fits the individual projects and the appropriate grade for the students.
So I'm gonna just have you take a look at this one slide for collective intelligence. We really tried to break it out and describe a lot, not just, you know, what the general category of collective intelligence is, which is working respectfully and responsibly with others, exchanging and evaluating ideas for a common objective, but really looking at that third column of present, having kids grow towards being able to do all of those things by the time they leave us. Certainly we know that our youngest learners are not going to come to the table being able to listen carefully to and evaluating other members' contributions. I can wholeheartedly tell you that's not happening in my kindergarten and first grade classrooms right now. If they're facing forward, we're really happy right now. But over time, they grow in their abilities and they learn strategies of how to be able to do that. And you'll also see in collective intelligence that we're also really kind of taking group ownership. We're talking about questioning group assumptions to achieve a goal and evaluating other members' contributions as well as their own, and equitably and purposefully dividing up roles. So kids are taking control of those groups, but they're also being acknowledged for their leadership in doing those things by getting above the present, by getting to the achievement end. So they get to even a 4 if they're actually taking leadership roles in that work. And Jen, I appreciate you bringing up the global thinking pieces. I'm gonna go a little bit more into those because that's been something that I jumped into the past couple of years. But along with that, I just wanted to make sure that you see that the 5 categories that we've always valued are still the same in the new matrix. So we still value the same 5 categories: critical thinking, creative thinking, communication, collaboration, self-direction, and global thinking. Those have been with us since 2013. What's changed is some of the components underneath are what we call capacities. Those have changed somewhat. And I can't remember, some of them are the same. I'm looking at analyzing as one.
But there
Okay,
used
so
to be
test
analyzing
results.
and
Used to have
synthesizing, and they basically,
perspectivizing.
yeah, they
That's-
collapsed a little bit, right? Perspectivizing collapsed into alternate perspectives. I know we used to have one that was reflection, and you can see elements of that in self-awareness and in decision-making. So really, everything that was in those 21st century capacities is still expressed in these. They're just, the redundancies were eliminated. And when we were tasked by the state, of course, without funding, to revise our profile of a graduate, we really looked at what can we reasonably assess. 15 capacities was too much to be able to assess in a 1-credit course. So that was maybe the driving factor of being able to say, so that became our independent study project, which many, many years ago was Capstone, and I was the chair of that committee. And then also the personal finance course at the high school. But what I think makes those courses so powerful is that students are having contact with these skills from kindergarten on. By the time they're in high school, they've seen them over and over again. They really come to understand when we say alternate perspectives, what does that mean? And I can say, I teach a lot of seniors and we do Socratic seminars, and I see them say, hey, student who hasn't volunteered very much, what do you think about this? And really make the effort to try to draw people into the conversation and to give people a safe space to express their views. It's really a beautiful thing to see.
Where did the original 15 capacities come from?
Oh, good question. So that was there when I came. Actually, it was 20. There was an original 20. There were 20 overwhelming. And that had come from a stakeholder group that developed off of the mission of the re-envisioning of the district. So the 20 were included in teacher evaluation as my first introduction, but there was no curricular connections to anything in the 20 or anything in the vision. So the task became to embed the profile of a graduate into curriculum that was being developed. Exciting times. And then I went to a conference and it went down to 15 by the time I returned. I never left again. So, but it got down to 10. We had a stakeholder group filling this room. Board members were a part of that committee. Students, parents, teachers, coordinators, Board of Ed, admin, and we hashed through several days of really looking at all different kinds of student profiles, actually, to help us to determine what would be an effective 10. And one of the words that came up over and over again that you will see embedded purposefully in some of these rubrics is the word empathy, and really trying to develop a more empathetic citizenship. So we really took care in developing some of those opportunities. So I flipped to this one, citizenship and alternate perspectives, because that's in our global thinking column. And the global thinking column is the one when I did an analysis of all of our units and what the capacities were. That was our leanest area, was global thinking. So we took a look at that amid the pandemic, some of the same people at the table. And this has been vetted through 2 different committees. But we really started to think like, what is it about citizenship and alternate perspectives that's really difficult for teachers? Like, why aren't they kind of unpacking that and taking that on and bringing that into units? And of course, it's tricky content. And we thought if we unpacked it, then maybe it would help teachers to know a little bit about what those classrooms opportunities would be. So I'll give you an example. Citizenship. One of the things that students should be able to do is to make decisions regarding civic action ethically and responsibly. And what we did was say units would include some sort of experience with one or more of the following. Demonstrate that civic actions may take many forms, including but not limited to awareness raising or informed discussions, considering alternate perspectives, information sourcing, public service announcements, or letter writings. But also, it would also have the opportunity for students to think about an understanding of their own values and why they determined to take action or not. And really thinking about a role as a community member and really understanding, but also being able to critique positions of power. So these might be some of the things that kids explore. Well, in alternate perspectives, they really would look at the I can statement as I can support my position while respecting the positions of others. And it's listening to and empathizing with multiple points of view on a topic, respectfully respond to different points of view, and manage your own internal and external conflict, and examine your own personal experiences. So those are some of the ways that we unpacked it for teachers, saying, here's some of the things that you can explore if you're going after these ideals. Over on the other side, behind Dr. Cook, you'll see a poster that we had up during one of our summer institutes. And in that one, we asked people to take a look at these 2 rubrics. And we said, highlight in purple the ideas that are more academic in nature, and then highlight in green the ideals that are more social emotional learning in nature. And you can see there's a nice mix of purple and green in those rubrics. So we're hoping that our global thinking starts to develop and emerge and get a little bit more sophisticated than what we were initially able to do. That is our area that is least developed. The area that is most comfortable for our teachers is critical thinking. We're all really trained in how to help kids do analysis. So we don't want to get unbalanced. We want kids to actually grow in all of the capacities and have opportunities to do that. So that's what this piece is here, these I can statements. And that was vetted through 2 committees. So before we go on to the language arts adoptions, do you have any questions for Jen about her committee? She will be doing a committee presentation on October 11th, right? I think it's October 11th, for the full board. So the board has an opportunity to hear a little bit more about the work of that committee.
So how does this translate, based on this work that was done over the summer, into the day-to-day classroom experience? How does that roll out? How is it overseen? How do we have evidence that it's being picked up? Just give the committee a sense of where it goes now based on this work.
Sure. Over the course of the past year, I think all of the different department heads, speaking more from the high school, have looked at what the 21st century capacities were and what the reduced capacities are, and sort of made a comparison of, oh, if it's this, then it becomes this, and understanding all of that. And those are going bit by bit into EduPlanet, and the previous rubrics are being replaced with the new rubrics for the curricular components, appearing mostly in PBAs, but not exclusively. But we try to do those a little bit, those skills in like transfer tasks and the shared experiences that are leading up to a more summative assessment. And then, when we do those PBA assignments with students, we really take some time to unpack them, to have a conversation about, hey, I'm asking you to use alternate perspectives. What does that mean, right? It talks about having various perspectives. What perspectives might be appropriate to this project? So we're talking about my own personal perspective, as well as the perspective of someone who has an opposing viewpoint, or of this author, character, multiple characters, films that we've seen, different things, or sometimes it's a historical perspective versus a more modern perspective. So really take the time to unpack what that means for the individual assignments. The students can have some ownership and understanding of what the expectations are. And that's why I actually really like the transition to those I statements. As I said, I have a Jeffrey student. I also have a Polson student who will come and say, Mom, help me check my rubric, right, for their assignments. I'm like, students really do this at home? That's awesome. It's so reassuring that the time was well spent and that it means something to students, and that they can go back, oh, it's asked me to do this. Did I really do that enough? So I think it really means something to students to have an understanding of what the expectations are. And, a lot of our students are really aiming for that for. So for them to really have a written piece of what that means and what that looks like, often with some student work to accompany it.
And it's right there in front of the teachers as they do their instructional planning.
Right.
So it's just starting right off. Do we have any members of the public comment? Reason I ask is one of my goals, and the goals of the committee, is as we talk about these things, try and explain what acronyms are.
I was just
Because
talking
the
to
general
someone
public
about that.
is going PBAs,
What?
rubrics, what are they talking about?
Fair. I know for NEAS, we made a whole list of acronyms, what they mean with the definition, so we can hand them to the business committee.
Language.
There were a lot of them.
Sure.
That's Kathy there.
I don't see her as yet.
Yeah, Kathy texted right before the meeting that she was stuck in traffic and she might not actually be able to join, so.
No, I was just gonna ask, as students are completing their assignments at home and that sort of thing, parents have access to the rubrics to be able
The
to
rubrics, I
assist
believe,
in
are
them?
online.
So they have them online, do they get paper copies to come home with as well?
The specific rubrics for student
Yeah, right.
assignments are sometimes customized to that grade level or that content. So, I was putting together a presentation today, and I was taking actual samples from our performance-based assessments
Mhm.
and putting them up. So they look different in second grade than they do in fifth grade.
Oh,
and-
sure.
And they do in eighth grade and they do at the high school. But they also look different according to content. So they're trying to, it's not just, can I take a different perspective? Can I take the perspective of whatever the thing is? Is it past to present? Is it character to character? So it's reflected in the assignment as well. Sometimes the kids have what we call a student-facing checklist, which is exactly mirrored after the rubric.
Okay.
So it's kid-friendly language and it truly is a checklist. And, I'm looking at the master set checklist here. So kids might have that, or they might actually have the authentic rubric that they've already gotten with the assignment. If it's a performance-based assessment, there's many times that we even say what the assessment is publicly in our curriculum component of the website. At the end of this unit, students will be doing this.
Okay.
And then they very much have the whole assignment and the rubric. But our job too is to give them feedback against that. So the reason why there's 4 columns is so if I'm meeting the standard, I can then understand where I can exceed. Or there's what we call a single point rubric that might just have the meets, and the teacher can write what their suggestions are for the kid to get closer to meets, or what they could do to exceed the meets. So there's a couple different fashions that it takes, but in every single unit, there's 1 or 2 of these capacities, and there's 1 or 2 always giving feedback to kids on rubrics or in some sort of assessment. And they're pretty public facing, like right now, if you go on the curriculum page and there's a drop down list, a bulleted list, and it says profile of a graduate. You hit on that, you'll see the 10 matrix, and then if you hit at the top columns, you'll see the rubrics right behind it.
Okay.
It flips over.
Yeah, I think that's good, especially our younger families who are coming into the system to know where they can access that information.
We load up as much as we can. We really do.
I'd say, I think once we get to middle school, the students will always have either a hard copy or a digital copy through Google Classroom. For the little ones, I think it's a little different, and those 4-point rubrics are overwhelming to them. It's just too much text to even sort through, so that those checklists work so well for the younger kids.
And we're trying to move back into having paper, a little bit more too.
Okay.
So more handwriting and notebooks and
Yeah.
passing things out and putting them in binders, but then they also have their Google Classroom.
Okay, great.
I mean, it's a much longer conversation that I would like to have at some time that I'm sure we don't have tonight, but I would love to know how this really translates to the students in terms of, it's important why. It's important because it affects my grade. It's important because these are skills I need to have in the next level. I would love to know what the student understanding of these are.
Steve, can I comment on that? Because that's exactly what I was gonna comment on is, SEL is, social emotional learning, especially being so newly integrated, K through 12 and across disciplines, and really made a part of our overall curriculum plan is tremendous. And thank you all. You're all to be congratulated for taking this on. I still have one daughter in high school, and I know that not all students take it seriously yet. They don't. I think that there's, we're supposed to learn this, so I'm showing that I'm doing this, but they don't necessarily wholeheartedly take on the mantle of the lesson and really try to incorporate it into their lives. And SEL is the type of thing that you need to really believe in, or you're not going to get anything out of it. You can all pretend to be nice and civil and, global thinking and all of that while you're in class, but it's not going to help you as an adult if you haven't really learned the lessons. I think, and I'm encouraged that over time, as that curriculum starts in, kindergarten, goes all the way up, and as our students have more time with it, and as the world gets more acclimated to SEL as a response to some of the ugliness that's out there, I think that students will come to appreciate it more. But in the meantime, I would just urge that one approach may be to do exactly that, to tell the kids why this is important. Tell the students why, why colleges look for this stuff. We have a lot of highly, college aimed, motivated students. We have a lot of students, a growing population that are choosing to not go to college. So you need to also, give them the why. When you're working in group settings, whether you know, it's in college or a career, whatever it is, you know, this is gonna be important to you. So I just, you know, I guess my point is just, thank you. It will take time for this to pay off in dividends. And one way we can make it pay off quicker, I think, is to keep reminding kids why we're doing this. And it's for your benefit.
Definitely something we value all the time is showing kids transfer. So I will use this when, not just knowledge, but these skills too. And we try to do that through, the performance-based assessments are supposed to be as close to authentic scenarios as you can get, just for that purpose. And those are at the end of every unit. So you can see application across a lot of settings. That being said, sometimes we're talking about, values and beliefs, and that falls with outside of the purview of public schools. Certainly though, we can look at our profile of a graduate and say that we believe in global thinking, we believe in helping students to hone those skills and of citizenship and alternate perspectives in our academic arena. In the next portion that we have, we're going to pick up where Jen left off, because I had a couple different groups that were working during the summer in English language arts, and there were two units, one in grade 5 and one in grade 7, that we had made some pokes at alternate perspectives, but really felt that we had to do a better job in it after we took a look at what we were doing and what was evolving out of this work. So these kind of follow on the heels of the last ELA presentation that we did at the end of June. So we're picking up where we left off on that. And this one, we adopted at that time K through 3 and grade 6 and 8. So this one actually is filling in 4, 5, and 7. And then at our next meeting, you'll see some high school stuff too. So, but there are some interesting units in this one. But you're going to see some familiar themes that we talked about last time, and you're going to see some of those ideas of how you put it into action too. So I'm going to turn it over to the ELA team. Go team, go.
So similarly to last time that we met, many of the units have been revised with some common things. One of them is that all our units are revised so that the understanding, transfer skills, the essential questions all come from our newly revised guiding document, our ELA guiding document. So that similar theme will run through tonight for grades 4, 5, and 7. Each grade level has an updated scope and sequence for morphology and grammar. And we have some SBAC embedded connections for students, or Smarter Balance assessment connections within the units. So that's true for grades, all the way down from 3rd through 8th grade. But tonight we're talking specifically about 4, 5, and 7. So we can just go to the next.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not, okay. It died, we wore it out.
Didn't turn it off.
No. It's just tired. You know what, I'll just do it here. Okay. Let me see if I can't move this way. Sorry, everyone. There we go. Oh, perfect.
Stop sharing.
Oh, now I'll start sharing. No. Okay. 1, 2. There we go. Sorry, guys.
Now, did you want to speak, or we're just pretty much?
Yeah, this one, I talked about the 2 units that we really worked on in light of this new work. And grade 5 and grade 7 both had existing units. One was picturing change, and the other one in grade 7 was a well-established unit called exceptionalities. But now we looked at changing those units, and this was through an intense couple of days, you know, of working together. The grade 5 and 7 teams actually met together with our coaches and also with an expert that we brought in outside of district, Kate Roberts, and we refocused those units. So now picturing change with a focus on seeing ourselves and the characters we read about and point of view and perspective. And the grade 7 one is anchored around a text, Harvard Me, which they're doing analyzing perspectives. So those are 2 very specific units that we crafted around the new rubrics and this new work.
So I'll speak a little bit.
So, I'm sorry, so under grade 7, it's still a study about, or the units about exceptionalities, but it's just being presented differently? Going using the same text and.
It's actually been completely revamped. So I'll speak to that. I have a slide on it. But it's been completely revamped and we've reshaped it so it follows the whole class novel structure. Where they spend about 2 weeks in the whole class novel and then 2 weeks in the book club and then 1 week into an independent book.
So I'll speak specifically about grade 5. Gail is right. It was always called Picturing Change. It's still called Picturing Change. We just have a little more of a honed in focus. The premise of the unit remains the same. It approaches stories through the lens of windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors, where students are given a wide range of books, windows into the realities of others, mirrors that reflect their own lives, and then sliding glass doors where they can walk into the world that the author created for them. You know, when we look through that lens of windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors, we're really prioritizing diversity. We're honoring many cultures. We're promoting empathy, like Gail spoke about before. And we have a much more clear focus on point of view perspective in this unit. So that's kind of, it's just become a little more focused. I don't know if you want to say anything else about 7.
Yeah, so the grade 7 unit builds off of the work done in grade 5. And we took a unit that had become very topical and based on the topics and rooted it in reading skills. That was our number 1 goal, was to make sure that we were really focused on the reading skills. And the skills needed to navigate and analyze the alternate perspectives.
So these ideas, they are advanced in what format? Is this group discussion among students?
For grade 5, primarily, yeah, they could be working in small groups. There's a wide variety of picture books available. So this is done in picture books in grade 5. There's so much out there. It's hard to keep up with the new picture books that have come out, but we have a great selection that we have for all students. So they do work together to have those conversations.
And they respond to a prompt or a question.
Yeah, where do I see myself in this book? Where might I empathize with another? We have some guided questions for them that kind of group the unit.
And one of the things that we worked to create on the day that both grades were here was a respectful discourse learning progression, where we created in kid-friendly like I statements, a learning progression of what does it mean to have these discussions that might be a little challenging, but in a way that's respectful and that everybody's ideas can be heard and all like voices can be honored in that conversation.
So it goes back to your question, Jen, about do kids see this? And so that is a student-facing document. Here's how I would do this. Here's how it looks like, what it sounds like. I'm going to move on to grade 4.
Okay, so grade 4, some of the revisions that we've had there is specifically in writing. We have a nonfiction writing unit that we centered around an author study of Steve Jenkins and Seymour Simon. Students create their own mini informational book off of the style of those authors, as well as taking into consideration everything they learned about in the reading skills, which is already a pretty solid unit. We just added in more of the writing. Second unit that we formalized is called Personal Essay. And that really focuses on structure and organization of essay writing, which serves them greatly when they get to 5th grade and they have to write their first ever literary essay, where the focus is not just structure and organization, but much more of the analysis. So those 2 units, I would say, are the biggest tweaks for grade 4. And of course, now they have a guide for morphology and grammar as well. So that's grade 4, and then we have grade 5. So grade 5 has always had something. If you've had students that have gone through the district, you've probably heard of the declamation contest for the poetry unit. We formalized a unit around poetry, which we're super excited about. It's a, I don't want to call it a lost art, but it's a great genre that I don't think we do enough of. So in grade 5, we have an updated poetry unit with a focus on speaking and listening skills and the standards. Students are orally rehearsing throughout the unit, working on their fluency. At the end of the unit, after students have looked at poetry in many different ways, each team picks 3 or 4 students that, and their class helps pick 3 or 4 students that go to this. It's now called a declamation celebration, not so much of a contest. This year was really special and unique. We brought down high school students to recite their poem that they did in 5th grade, and it was a big hit. They were the MCs for the declamation, and then we had 3 or 4 students times like 4 classes come up and present and really speak in front of the whole group. It went over really well. So that's one big change there. I already spoke about picturing change. And again, in addition, we have the scope and sequence for morphology and grammar. But the poetry unit is really great. And it's also a springboard for what comes later in 7th grade, which you'll hear from Stephanie. We try to, like many of our units, if it happens in 4th, it may happen again in 6th, and it may happen again in 8th. I can think of many units that kind of come up again, but they're way more deeper each year.
All right. I'm so excited now to know about 7th grade right now. Okay, so to kind of start this process, we had 2 big themes that we wanted to keep in mind while we were revising our units. The first being we wanted to make sure that all of our units led to high volume reading. 7th grade is kind of that stepping stone into the world of middle school, and high school isn't that far away. So we really wanted to make sure that we were pushing for high volume reading. But then also when we were writing, we wanted to make sure that we were planning differentiation. We wanted to think about what are the challenging points, or what are those moments of trouble going to be, those predictable problems, and how can we plan ahead so that when we're in that moment, we kind of have a toolkit ready to go for our students. So that was something that we've done throughout all of the units. The other things that we've carried throughout all of the units were the embedded morphology and grammar, the planned predictable problems, and then also we worked to create teacher pacing guides, just to have a better kind of guide throughout the entire year. For the first unit, one of the major changes was to shorten up the first unit. So this unit is called Reading and Writing Under the Influence of Mentors, where students spend time reading in a couple of different genres and then also practicing writing within that genre. So we shortened the unit and we removed 2 of the original genres. We made the decision to remove the rap from it, and then also the alternate perspectives. And the reason why we chose those 2 to remove is because they're things that are going to be taught later in the year. So we added in a poetry unit where we can bring the rap into that. And then we have the alternate perspectives unit at the end of the year. So these are things that are not lost and forgotten. They're just happening a little bit later. And then we also selected mentor texts that the teachers will be using throughout the unit. For the second unit, this is a brand new unit. I'm super excited about it. This is analyzing author's craft through an author study of the author Alan Gratz. And we chose Alan Gratz because he is a super high interest author. We've seen that his books, the kids absolutely love them, again, with the high volume reading. But then also we noticed that he has written books about a variety of historical fiction topics. So there's something that will interest all of our readers, but then also he has books that span over a very wide range of levels. So we know that there will be access points for all of our students. And then we shifted, so the mentor text for this unit is Prisoner B 3087. And we shifted the focus from just being a study of the elements of historical fiction to being an author's craft study. So we're looking really closely at the author craft moves and the purpose behind those moves.
I'm just going to pause right there. So when we talk about mentor text, that's how we use the text, is we help kids to unpack it and see what moves the author is making in order to deliver their message. So that's another one of those terminology things, like we like using those.
Does anyone else know what it is?
It's what the teacher's using to model during the lesson.
Yes.
Okay, so following that, we have the literary essay, which was previously written around themes, so analyzing and proving a theme. Because we changed our historical fiction to be around craft and purpose, we shifted the literary essay to now be an analysis of those craft moves and the purpose and impact of those craft moves. So that was a minor change for that. Perfect. So now with nonfiction, originally nonfiction was written as one big unit where it was reading and writing taught all together. We wanted to split it so that we could be really conscious in our teaching of the explicit nonfiction skills for reading and then for writing. So we split it into two like mini units. So it's a 3-week reading unit and a 2-week writing unit that they go right one after the other. And in that, we spent time creating the models so that we had those ready to go. And then we also created a new reading PBA, which kind of goes to our conversation earlier, where students are thinking about the research skills from the reading unit and trying to think about what it might look like in the future. If I'm doing this research work now, what does that look like for me in my future job or whatever my future path might be? So really trying to make that real world connection. Okay, so the next 2 units are brand new units. We were really fortunate to be able to work with Kate Roberts in developing the next 2 units. And one thing that I think is really important to note is that over the course of the year, we wanted to make sure that we were having opportunities for repeated practice. So introducing a skill earlier in the year and circling back to it in a different context so that the kids can really master it. So these 2 units are a really great example of that. So the first is a close reading unit to interpret theme. So like I said, it's brand new. Students spend time reading short stories for the purpose of analyzing theme. And then we're circling back to that essay where the final assessment of this is that they have to analyze the short story that they've been working on close reading through a theme essay. So they're taking those essay skills that we've already taught earlier in the year and applying them in a different context. And then following that, we have the interpreting poetic elements. So again, this is where students can draw on the skills that are introduced earlier in the year from both our first unit where they're writing and reading under the mentor text, but then also they're building on the work that they do in the author's craft unit. So they're taking the author's craft analysis that they've done and taking it to the next level and thinking about structure and poetry. And then finally, our whole class novel, Harbor Me, Analyzing Perspectives. So like I said earlier, this follows Kate Roberts' plan of a whole class novel. So the kids will be reading Harbor Me by Jacqueline Woodson for 2 weeks, where that's the book that we're reading together as a class. Following that, they go into book clubs and then they spend 2 weeks in book clubs and then have 1 week in an independent book. All of the teachers, Pam and myself, have spent time reading the books that are being offered for the book club. So we've all vetted the books. And this kind of serves as like a culmination of all of their work from the entire school year. And it also serves as like a stepping stone towards the work of the high school where they see more whole class novels. We have those core texts. So it's a really great entry point for them to be able to practice what it actually feels like to be working in that style.
So you'll see that there are reoccurring themes, reoccurring skills that kids are developing over time. And the next level of work, always. There is also a lot of selection that happens. So when we say the word book clubs, it means there's 5 titles, look them over, pick which one you're going to engage in and commit to. And independent books the same way. There's a whole array of books. You can go and dive into the one that's most meaningful to you. So we take it very big picture, smaller, and kind of that gradual release and application. But in every unit, again, there's that performance-based assessment that is the task that really tells us to what degree the kids are transferring those skills. So you'll hear more about these, hopefully as the year goes on. We have some samples, but something exciting that we're doing this year, hoping to do this year, is if you recall on the website, we have an overview of all of our curriculum units that parents can access and all the various subjects and students do. But this year we're hoping to raise up student voice and to have our students actually do some describing and filming of what they learned in the course of units. So we're excited to try that. So of course has a full flight in trying to do that. But you know what, our goal is to have at least one student video for each course or grade level by the end of this year. So that's our goal, is to start there. Prior to that, we had teachers do all the explaining, and now we're flipping it around. What did you learn? Why is it important? What did you do? This, you know, what did this tell you? How did this help you in your life? You know, all of those questions.
We also have a wide variety with our short stories and our poetry, and so there's a lot of choice there, and all of those have been vetted too. And I'm definitely especially happy that we're bringing in the short story and poetry more so. You know, it's
Why?
great for close reading, and those are genres that sometimes get forgotten.
Why?
Why?
Are you
well-
happy about that?
Oh, I think I have found that students really respond to poetry and short story. I mean, sometimes it can get a little overwhelming in a full novel, and it's a great opportunity to really hone in on close reading skills in both of those. And it's also such a great way of, because it takes less time to read a poem or to read a short story, that we can bring in more variety, more diversity. You know, it's easier to do that with. And we had a lot of fun finding poems and short stories that we can put into a Padlet or a menu for them to choose.
I would say too, there's a lot to be learned from short stories. They get very sophisticated when you have to write an essay in, you know, X amount of words. You really have to pick your words carefully.
The
So
craft
you can
is
teach a lot
tremendous,
of
and then we
craft.
talk about author's craft for poets and short story writers to say what they need to say in so few words is remarkable.
And
It's
the
really
authentic
exciting.
reading that we do as adults, you know, it's mainly short snippets, and you're getting a lot of information from short snippets online, or what you're reading in newspapers, they're getting shorter and shorter.
We use short story a lot in Spanish also, and in world language, and one thing I always say to the students is, you know, yes, we're reading for close reading, so this is 3 pages long, you can read it 10 times. But you have the time to really dig in and look at
Yes,
what is
definitely.
this word, why is this word better than that word, or, you know, the impact of some of the real details. You don't have the time to do that in a 300-page book.
This is such a cool moment for me. Spanish teacher here and English teachers. And, you know, it was another cool moment, you know, this summer, when everyone can talk the same language in the district, that the standards for writing, the standards for units, the standards for the profile of the graduate are all the same across the district. And, you know, Jen is a CRC reviewer, which means that she reviews science and social studies and
I reviewed
CTE.
seventh grade
I was wondering, have you
English.
did
Seventh
you
grade
review
English.
any of
Which
that?
was actually a really cool time to do that because my daughter's in 8th grade. So, you know, going through it, and the poetry unit was her favorite unit last year, which shocked me. because it's
That's right.
not very
Because
good.
they're serious
Kids
learners.
love
But
poetry.
she
They
really
love it.
responded to it.
Michelle's got her review.
This is my last project, well, my big last project was reviewing all the feedback. This is just grade 4 and 5. Every one of these pages is feedback from that council. So the
It's a
process
serious
is
council.
so, you know, it works so well and they're so thoughtful. And I appreciate it, even though I was staying up late at night trying to get everything organized and presenting back to the teachers. But it really is such a process, and I think it really does truly work. Because even these people that might have reviewed me might not have even been English, they could be, and they notice things that maybe we didn't notice. You're so close to the units, you know, which is important to have someone else look.
There's always 2 reviewers, before it comes to.
Any questions? Comments?
No questions, just, I would like to say that I'm very pleased and excited to hear about all of the open discussion that's being encouraged, and, you know, really challenging kids to not just put their opinion out there, but to also respectfully listen and internalize what their peers have to present, because there's always opportunities to learn from one another if we keep that open mind. So I'm really excited to hear that we're putting such a focus on that, you know, starting at the young ages. That's going to carry well in many aspects of our students' lives as they go forward.
I'd just like to ask a question that's a little bit off topic, but while we have you here. Do you find that being involved in the curriculum writing and the whole curriculum process is like professionally rewarding? Does it attach you to your job and to this district more than if you were just handed curriculum to teach?
Absolutely.
100%.
I was at a conference this summer in Oregon, and I was probably with 13 other states. And I was amazed that the other 12 states sitting around me, none of them, many of them are handed the programs that they're using, which was shocking. And many of them were shocked that we are, coaches and coordinators in our district are so connected to the work with the teachers, and that teachers have a say. She's like, what do you mean you have a say? All our teachers have, they're all sitting around the table. So I felt very unique in that sense.
Were they larger districts, Michelle, or were
We
they
had
all very
Hawaii, we had Washington, we had Delaware, we had a smattering of all different states.
But so many
It's not
districts in other parts of the country are more county, so I wonder if that,
Well,
happens in either region.
Like I think in Delaware, they hand them one.
Yeah, because they're counties, I
That's-
think it has something
yeah.
to do with
So
that.
I don't
So
know,
we're lucky there.
having been on some NEAS visits for other high schools in the state, they're getting handed.
Oh, they are
curriculums.
too?
Yeah, a lot of places are being handed.
I mean, I know,
curriculums and-
Gail, you said the number, I think we have 800 and something units in this district published, and, there's tweaking that happens, and we wanna, when it's like a living, breathing document, when something comes up, we can go to Gail and present, and then it goes back to CRC if we need it, and then it can come back to the board. So I do feel like it's, a living, breathing document that really is, I think we're very blessed, honestly, to have the opportunity to take teacher feedback. They feel connected, and I think when you're more connected to something, you're more apt to be excited about doing it. The teachers are handing it, you're not handing it over for the first time, and now you have to teach it. They were a big part of some of these changes, which is huge.
We have a board have been very supportive of, Gail's approach to curriculum development, and we're just amazed at, the product. And again, thank you so much for that. We will continue to support it, I'm sure. And we'll continue to support the professional development that helps to.
Hand in hand.
Yeah.
There's 2 points I want to make. I support your work. I support the depth of looking at the skills and the rubrics and breaking it down and the energy that goes into it. And I listen closely to what you're saying. But there's another theme that runs behind, and it's part of what Seth is speaking to, which is, each of you spoke to a level of excitement in new units and new approaches and the energy you look forward to bringing to these new dimensions. And curriculum is important, and the nature of it and the design of it is important, but there's nothing magic about it. And the reality is that if kids don't adopt it, and if kids don't put their energy into it, you can have the best curriculum in the world, and it isn't going to get that outcome. What closes that gap is the level of energy that the adults bring to it in the investment in it, because the kids pick up on that unquestionably. So this entire process of how many people worked over the summer?
90.
The process of involving teachers and their craft and respecting them and cultivating and nurturing that energy to come back to the classroom, from my perspective, and there's lots of research to support it, is the most powerful and dynamic aspect of it, beyond the specifics of the writing. The degree that we allow teachers to bring their own excitement into the classroom then allows students to develop that. And I absolutely believe it is central to a lot of the success we've been having in town. My other point is this, and I understand you're doing a presentation to the board. And as you do a presentation to the board, you're going to speak to, these are the things we've attended, and these are the rubrics, and this is how we scaffold it, and this is how it moves along. It's why I asked you why. Because this is what I think about. Literature poetry, that aspect in all of our lives as people, the aesthetics of it, the beauty it brings to our life is enormously important. You know, and we talk skills, 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 and skills. But if we do all of the author perspective and all the structure of poetry, and we don't put the energy, or we don't allow them to just enjoy the beauty and the aesthetics and the feelings that we can get from literature, then we failed. I'm not suggesting that you're doing that, but it wasn't a prominent part of your presentation, and I get it, because you know you're presenting to the board. But as one member of the board, I want to underscore, in the end, if you don't produce students that love literature and it enriches their life and they carry, then we've all failed. So that's my point.
And I think that's why it's so important that the teachers have a voice in the curriculum. So, and it wasn't easy, you know, I mean, there were times when the teachers were overwhelmed, you know, with the deadlines and being taken out of class and working in the summer. But in the end, when we all looked back on it, I think we were excited. You know, we pick short stories, we pick poetry. I mean, even just during the summer, I would email and say, I just found this poem, what do you think of it? You know, I'm gonna put it on, tell me, you know, I think kids will really respond to it. So I'm glad that you feel that way. And I'm glad that we do have a district that does allow for teacher voice instead of the Board of Ed bringing in developed programs and saying, this will raise test scores.
I had in the elementary school, middle school, I had a very good language arts teacher, and he was a male, and he did this unit on trees and poems on trees. You know, it's like, but the energy and I mean, he would do it to the point where he had tears in his eyes. He changed how I looked at the world for the rest of my life. I never looked at a tree the same way ever again, you know? And, you know, that's the power of what you do and what we do, you know, collectively. So, anyway, thank you very much for your
Yeah.
presentation.
Thank you.
Check for public.
You have any?
No.
I don't know if we need an action item to move the adoption of these 4, 5, and 7 units onto the.
Are we adopting them, or were they just being presented to us? I think they were just being presented to us.
Yeah, I think that the way that we proceeded before is that curriculum reports out tonight and makes a recommendation from the committee. And then 2 weeks later, the board votes. It's not on tonight's agenda. It gives them time.
So the committee recommended that we move this forward.
I do, I recommend we do it this forward.
Good. Okay,
Thank you.
then we are adjourning at 6:30, right up there.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.